We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Safiya Reid. She is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Pure Insurance. Thank you so much for being on the show. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Christina. I appreciate it. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And the first thing, I remember that so vividly. I wanted to be an astronaut as when I was a child. And I'll never forget what my mom told me. She said, I need you to find something on the ground. And so I think in hindsight, that's so indicative of a lot of how many people of color are raised, where we are grounded. We're taught to keep our heads down, don't rock the boat, just do the work, it'll speak for itself. And I was like, wow, like my mom literally grounded, my idea, my aspirations for myself. And I know she didn't do that intentionally. It probably came from a place of fear. But it's one of those things that I recognize in the workforce where a lot of people of color, or people just from marginalized backgrounds in general, so much of the guidance that they've received and advisement that they've received from their communities has been rooted in fear of not wanting you to be hurt or taken advantage of. But yeah, we got to start breaking some of those for sure.
Absolutely. We have to start breaking some of those. And it's always interesting to think about where we thought we would be 20, 30 years from now as well. And I think that a lot of folks are changing the way that you think about kind of the expectations around their company, the work that they do, and really kind of asking for more, especially over the last few years to be there for their families, to be there for their full lives, inside and outside of work. More than 60% of employees say it's important for their company to really share in the caring for their families and also the communities that they're in as well. When we're talking about Pure Insurance, how are you kind of showing up for employees both in both realms of families and communities?
Sure. So I think I've got really no shortage of examples to pull from, but the most recent, I'm not sure if you were familiar with the baby formula shortage that took place a couple of months ago. Well, our representatives of our Women's Leadership Council, which is one of our employee resource groups, they connected with HR, and they were able to kind of put together kind of like a baby formula, like scouting platform spreadsheet where people were going and able to buy stuff and was able to like ship it to their families. And, it was one of those things where it probably helped a handful of folks, and in a 1,000-person organization, the few can sometimes go unnoticed. And the fact that all of this effort was put together just for what ended up being a handful of people, that didn't matter. It was just this idea that there's something here, like we have an opportunity to help our folks directly. And so I was really proud of that effort. And so many people who weren't even impacted by it were just proud to be able to work for an organization that had, employees that were kind of thinking holistically about the things that were kind of going on in the real world and how it affects our ability to show up and be our best selves.
I love that. I think that's a really good example, and also that ripple effect of, even if you're not looking for baby formula right now, recognizing this is a need for your teammates, for your friends on the team, and really having the company and leaders and employee resource group leaders really develop that resource as not a baby formula company. Really special as well. And we're seeing more companies really be part of the conversation about what's going on in the world. There's no shortage of a lot of things happening. And I want to ask from your opinion in terms of, diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. What do you think the role of private and both public employers is to really create more equity in the world on a large scale?
So I think that's it's a great question, but man, there are a ton of moving pieces to answer that. So I'll start with public companies first. they certainly have a lot more influence and power in this economy, in this country, to be able to affect real change, but they can model it first. So I think about, let's say we're in the insurance space. So I think about, and this could be a public or a private company, but right now, I don't know if you've seen some of the stories where you've had homeowners from different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, who have tried to put their home up for sale and get it appraised. And, it comes back at, let's say, 200,000. And then the home is then staged with someone who isn't from a diverse background. And it's then, a new adjuster is brought out. And there's sometimes, 500-600% increase in how that's assessed. To me, if this is an industry that you're in, that's an opportunity to start making, obviously you have a responsibility to your employees first and foremost, because they are doing the heavy lifting, they are doing the work, and you have to make equitable, inclusive spaces for them so that they can thrive. But there's also this opportunity where, hey, look, if you're, think about the inequities in your industry, in the actual work that you do. It's not a one size fits all approach, because we all do different things, but there's definitely opportunities that you can look for that are specific to your business, specific to your niche of that industry, where you can advance change. Because, going and saying, hey, well, because they were appraising that, because they're, underappraising these homes, what happens is, if there is an emergency and that home needs to be insured, they're not insured at the right amount. So then what happens then? Now you're leaving families who may already be in a disadvantaged situation, opening them up to even more, issues of not, that come along with not being underinsured or not being able to build generational wealth because they couldn't get what they, what was worth for their home. So I think there's a lot of different ways to be able to show up for equity, not just with your employees, but specifically within the niche of your business as well. Another example of how businesses can kind of look for opportunities to be equitable, not just in the organization, but as well as in kind of to the greater industry, to the greater community at large. I love that Erin Driscoll, she's our VP of investments, and I love this idea. And she did it on her own. I only found out about it after fact, which is my favorite DEI centered work, is work that had nothing to do with, you just went about it on your own. But I love that Erin was able to apply this DEI lens as a part of our investment strategy, where she was able to purchase tax credits in the state of South Carolina that actually allowed for an HBCU to build out their new center. And this center is also going to include a memorial to the AME Church of the Charleston shooting that had happened years ago. And so it was this opportunity, like, hey, not only can we build the community, but we're also investing too. Like, this is going to come back to us 2 and 3 folds years after the development of the buildings being made. And I just thought that was probably one of the most spot on examples of how, regardless of what you do, what role you're in, what you do in the organization, if you're applying that DEI lens, you can find a way to advance, whether it be the community or whether it be our internal organization, but there's always ways to push for equity. And I thought that was a really unique example. And I was just really proud of my colleague that she just did that. I was super proud of it.
I love those two examples because it really shows you can make such a difference in the lives of your employees and also externally in the community, and really encourage others to take that ownership mentality as well. And I think having the opportunity to set the precedent in your industry, in your field, is also something that comes up in these conversations as well. In terms of kind of your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, both internally and externally, we know that there is a lot you could focus on, and I believe that there are 4 pillars that you think about up here. Can you tell me a little bit about what those are?
Sure. So when we were building out the infrastructure for DEI, for one of the first things that we did was kind of go on a listening tour throughout the entire organization. So that's across departments, across management levels, across experience levels as well. And so what we came from there, we decided, hey, this is where we believe there's a need, and this is where we want to focus our attentions. And so we look at representation and inspiration. And so that's essentially looking at talent acquisition, development, and retention, not just from entry-level employees, but all the way up to senior executives as well. Secondly, we have inclusion and belonging. And so really the heart of that is making sure that every single person at this organization feels safe and supported to do their best work and has all of the resources that are available to them to do that. And so that includes our employee resource groups, that includes our inclusion training, and not just training, these are workshops, and then you have accountability partners, and so that the content remains fresh. Like, we don't kid ourselves thinking that someone's going to show up for 3 hours of training and their entire perspective is going to be changed. Like, that's just not how humans work. Our third one is equitable treatment. This is where we do our pay equity reviews. This is where we're saying, hey, we have our entry level roles, are they still competitive in this market, especially with the rising cost of inflation? Like, are we still paying folks a livable wage? Everyone that works at Pure should be able to take care of their financial responsibilities in a dignified way. Are we doing that? So those are some of the things that we handle under that pillar. And then lastly, community. And so we look at community not just as our internal community or our ERG population. We look at that the community as well as the industry, the insurance industry, and what our responsibility is to them. And then, of course, like the community, our greater world at large in the communities that we live and work in.
I think that's definitely a holistic approach when you're thinking about kind of the difference that Pure can make both internally and externally. You mentioned accountability partners and the fact that everybody, no matter where you sit at the organization, should feel psychologically safe, physically safe, and empowered to do their best work. And we know that it is not one person or team's responsibility to do that. How do you think about really holding leaders accountable to have that ownership mentality to build more equity on their team and in their day-to-day processes as decision makers?
Absolutely. So I think about equity is also about making sure that everyone's voice is heard as well, right? That's a part of equity and inclusion. But, sometimes how we challenge folks is, if someone says, hey, I have this opportunity, I need to gain some more insights about a particular topic. I think I'm going to go to this person. The first question I have is, well, why? Do you always go to that person? When's the last time you went to someone else? And so there are little kind of subtle acts of equity and subtle acts of inclusion that you can kind of hold folks accountable by just asking questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be a challenging thing, but you can ask little questions just to understand people's thought process so that they understand that you're a part of, it's partnership. DEI essentially should not be seen as this like ancillary type of function. Like, this really is the foundation. It's the lens in which we should approach everything. And so asking questions like those to understand the thought processes and how people are making important decisions to make sure that all voices have been accounted for and understood for is important. Like, if you're getting ready to make, if you're sitting at the senior or mid to senior level, getting ready to make decisions that will definitely, no doubt, affect the day-to-day of entry-level employees. Have you spoken to them yet? Do you have a full appreciation for what their day-to-day looks like? Because how can you identify or really diagnose what the true concern is, what the true problem is, and then throw a solution at it if you don't have a full appreciation for the actual problem and what it looks like day-to-day for someone that it affects?
Yeah, you really want to make sure that all voices are heard, and also not everybody feels comfortable coming to their manager or going up to the CEO on day one or even year one as well. So making sure that the avenues are open, the conversation is continuous as well, and asking curiosity-based questions such as, who are we building this for? Who's part of the conversation? Is there anyone left out? And we know consistently auditing the employee experience is really critical right now as well. Can you tell me about how you've redesigned a system to be more equitable over the past 2 years, whether it's a process, policy, or initiative?
Certainly. I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but we did a pay equity analysis in terms with some of our within our entry level roles. And that was something that was immediately that we heard it from our employees. So we heard it, then we did the analysis on it and said, well, yeah, I think there might be an issue here. And then we moved really, really quickly with the help of our internal consulting company to bring that change management and to have that solution. I think there are a lot of other ways that we work on it as well, because people want to do meaningful work that they feel like actually contributes to the bottom line of the organization. And so if someone, we don't often think about it in this way, but if you have someone that's taking 75 extra clicks to do something that could be done in 5 clicks, like there might be a systems issue. Like, so how are we addressing that to make sure that people feel like they're not doing unnecessary work or spending unnecessary time to produce a particular outcome, of a given task? And so that's another thing that we're currently working on right now, is really just upgrading our systems. And I loved at the top of the year, our CEO, who's actually my accountability partner and has been, for the last 2 years since that first executive level inclusion training, we've been accountability partners, and we meet monthly to talk about a whole host of things. But yeah, one of the things that certainly was implemented that was super helpful was just like he asked each department to come up with kind of, obviously you have your goal setting, right? But this was like, no, the headline of this of all the goals, nothing is more important than XYZ, right? And so I did that as a practice for our DEI practice, and that certainly helped kind of focus our attentions for the year. But I love that for our technology department, their number one goal, nothing was more important than being able to ease the doing of business, be able to, was to increase the ease of doing business with us as an organization, not just from a broker standpoint, but also from an employee standpoint. And it wasn't like, oh, we want to go faster, we want to do this. It was like, no, we just want to make it easier to work with us. And I thought that was really important.
That is really important. And the example you gave around comp as well, there's been so many conversations around that too, and really understanding where people are today, making sure they're getting compensated in equitable and fair way is so important. It's related to livelihood, and it sounds like there are so many kind of different opportunities to create more equity and belonging, and you made great progress, new initiatives, getting that feedback. Where would you say, just like any person or leader is at a different part of their journey, every organization is as well, where is Pure today in their equity journey, and where would you like to be a year from now, knowing nobody has a crystal ball, but just thinking about the future?
So I had the opportunity to work outside of DEI capacity before this. And so I did compliance tax reporting for our high risk group. And then before that, I was the office manager for a brand new office in Roswell that had just opened up. And so what interested me in this role, because I was never interested in actually doing DEI in a full, in a named capacity before. I think that the spirit of the work was always with me. But what really attracted me to this opportunity at Pure was that I had already believed that the light was shining at Pure, right? I think, but we could all acknowledge that maybe there were some pockets that weren't feeling the fullness of that light. And so this wasn't, tear everything down, destroy and rebuild. Like that wasn't the approach, and some organizations are at that stage of the journey, but I recognized and felt really kind of grateful to be in an organization that already kind of got it. But like I said, we wanted to make sure that we were illuminating some of those areas. And so right now, a crystal ball, I would imagine that a year from now, some more areas are illuminated and are shining even brighter, and that those areas have now essentially, in my almost optimistic of lights, those areas are now shining light as well for other areas in the organization. And it's not just coming from one place. So I know I speak about that kind of figuratively, but specifically, certainly I would say, I would be really interested in our entry level roles being having more access to development opportunities, to sponsorship opportunities. Right now, we have mentoring circles, which are voluntary, but but we have quite I want to say more than half the organization is involved in a mentorship circle, and we run it for 9 months out of the year, and you meet monthly with sometimes it's a leader, sometimes it's a peer, but it's just this opportunity, this idea, this notion that we all have something to learn from each other. And so I would like to see more of that, more mobility, and more opportunities for our folks.
I love that. I think mentoring circles and also mentorship, sponsorship, your personal board of directors is always really important in terms of your support system, and also meeting folks at different parts of their careers, different parts of the organization too, and building that meaningful, impactful connection as well. Bringing it back to the present too, at the time of this recording, we are in the midst of Hispanic Heritage Month, and recognizing that supporting Hispanic or Latinx employees is something that I'm sure Pure is doing year round as well. How are you celebrating and acknowledging Hispanic Heritage Month this year?
Yeah, so we actually had a really unique opportunity. Right now, we are in like ERGs 2.0 is essentially what we're getting ready to land. Because what we found is we launched our ERGs 2 years ago, and they are thriving, right? And we obviously have metrics that monitor enrollments and participation and engagement rates. And what we've noticed is that even with retention and folks that are leaving, folks that are coming, our numbers have stabilized a bit. So what that told us was, hey, this is essentially our core ERG membership body, right? And now that we have gotten together, we know each other, we're thriving with each other, now it's time to be able to leverage this voice to be able to solve unique business challenges, right? And I think that's the missing link to ERGs. Like, it's not just about social activities, it's not just about group chats. All of those things are important. They do help to sustain the community. But the fact of the matter is that we have a unique, ERGs have a unique voice. They have a unique perspective. They span the entire, they incorporate all the departments of the organization are somehow represented within them. And so I'm excited that as we're kind of like turning, because essentially we soft launched our ERGs with Hispanic Heritage Month in 2020. It was our very first ERG that kind of launched in that way. And so it's exciting to now be kind of making this movement to 2.0, where, and during one of my accountability partner meetings with Ross, our CEO, he mentioned us, needing to be able to serve our military members, better. And so here we had this unique opportunity to bring in J.R. Martinez, who are Hispanic ERG. They're called Puro Orgullo, which means pure pride, pure proud in Spanish. And they were super excited to bring in J.R. Martinez, but obviously he's not just an actor, he's a veteran, and he's a whole bunch of other things, right? But his military background is important. And so this was a really good opportunity to say, hey, look, we can actually use this event that we brought together. He's going to talk about embracing your power and give a great keynote speech, but we also have an opportunity to kind of solve this unique business challenging that we're having by asking him, how do we better serve you and other people in the military versus active versus inactive? Like, how do we do these things? And so I'm really excited that he's going to be coming in for that kind of keynote discussion virtually next week. And he's going to talk about embracing your power. And I think he uses power as an acronym. And so he talks about the resilience and will and all that good stuff, and optimism. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to the insights that we're going to gain that are going to ultimately better serve our members that we insure, which will ultimately lead to, favorable outcomes. And so that's exciting to finally see, as we're making this transition, to finally see like, oh yeah, we can do both. And it feels good.
Yes, you absolutely do both. And that goes back to your earlier point as well, that people are craving to have their work really impact the business as well, and have the opportunity to leverage employee resource groups, and just the leaders from that group. Also, 2020 seems like 10 years ago, but it's also
I know.
It's also exciting to see all of the progress and change that has happened as well. You mentioned kind of before joining Pure as well, you have experience as a DEIB practitioner, and I have been seeing on the content streams all of these both documentaries and fictionalized kind of television series around these toxic workplaces. And I want to know, when we're thinking about the future, and a couple of companies have been doing this in terms of acknowledging where they were at and just really rebuilding, is there, from your perspective, ever a point of no return for a brand or a company because of the amount of harm they've caused? Or if not, what advice do you have to initiate that really intentional repair?
So I'll start by saying I'm a rational optimist, right? But to say that a company is irredeemable, I think is unfair, because ultimately, what is the company but the people? And you'd have to be making a broader statement to say that people are irredeemable. And I think that's kind of where we are right now in our kind of current culture, just super polarized, not really understanding or listening or appreciating kind of everyone's unique perspective and where they are. And that's not to say everyone's perspective is right. Just because you have one doesn't mean it's the right one. But we do need to listen for sure. And so, no, I don't think that a company is completely irredeemable, because I don't think people are. And obviously there's some folks that have a lot more work to do, and sometimes you have to bring in even more people, and sometimes some people just have to leave because they're just not in a conducive space for the skill sets that they have and their perspective. And so no, I in my heart of hearts, and I've watched all of the doomsday documentaries, like that's kind of one of my favorite things to do. So I watched WeWork, I recently watched the Victoria's Secret one, I watched
Me too.
yeah, Abercrombie and Fitch, like
Yep.
the list goes on. All of those, that's like one of my favorite pastimes is doomsday documentaries. But like I said, I am a rational optimist, and I do believe that, if the intention is pure, no pun intended, and you've got the right, and you've got the right set of folks, and you're willing to understand kind of where your gap in knowledge, information, experience, and insights are, and fill those gaps in earnest with the right people, then yeah, no, I think absolutely there's no company that can't be redeemed.
Absolutely. That intention is so important. How are you going to move forward? It's definitely not an excuse to try. It's never too late as well. Safiya, I would love to kind of pass the mic back to you to open it up. If there's anything I didn't specifically ask you that you would like to share with folks who are listening, or if you want to leave folks with a couple of key takeaways you hope people bring with them.
Yeah, I think, at the core of it, I believe DEI work is the work of the people. And so you can't serve the people if you are not constantly in connection with and understanding their realities. And so truly that is how I look at the DEI space. And I think people can put a lot of different metrics, people can put a lot of different names to it, different programs. It feels like there's a new letter that gets added, like all those, but if it is not centered on the people, then you've really missed the opportunity and missed the spirit of what the work is about.
The work is about the people, and to know the people, you have to know people's stories, really be open to that feedback and continuous conversations. And as you said as well, DEI is not something that is kind of a silo or separate department. It should be the foundation of what we're thinking about as well. Thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Christina.
Of course. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.